Buddy, I hope we are having an awesome day. I I've been running around all morning so far, and I am thankful that I had fabric last night in order to cut today's Saturday sampler. In fact, I'm just now opening up the package, and I have everything already cut. So they have been giving us fairly generous cuts over the past. Let's see, we've got 5 previous months. So they only needed to give us background, and I still had plenty of background from previous months, and everything else was within that, within the previous month's cuts left over. So, uh, yeah, I had to literally just run down to the car and pick up my kit because I'm like, I'm missing something, and I'm like, I need to be able to show everybody what the end block is going to be. So I had to run, come back, everything is good. You know, I don't normally run, but didn't run with scissors. It has been a gorgeous day here so far. We had some awesome rain last night. I was getting myself ready for the evening stuff, and I'm like, is that rain I hear? So I just I went out to the garage because I need to take some trash out anyway, and opened up the garage door just to enjoy the sound of rain. It was pouring hard, and just feeling the temperature just slowly drop. It's always fun to do that. And I'm sure my air conditioner was happy overnight that it didn't have to work as hard. And it did calm down for Riley to go potty at the end of the evening, so it was all good. Got up this morning, ran to Saturday Sampler. I almost forgot my block, which would have been a bad thing because I wouldn't have wanted to pay, I think it's like $15 just for a piece of paper, essentially, which I can build this out myself. So, yeah, I got to do show and tell. I have three exciting projects that I did show and tell on. The first one was the picnic pinwheel quilt from Stephanie Stitches that she taught at her retreat back in June. The second one, was the corresponding tote bag that Shannon taught at that same retreat. And then the third is I picked up the fabric on Tuesday. I started it on Wednesday and got finished getting the binding on yesterday afternoon. It is going to be a shop sample at one of the local shops, and I was able to show that off. I will be having pictures of everything in my weekly vlog this week, so if you want to see the pictures, you got to wait until tomorrow. But yeah, everybody is in love with what I made, so I am excited. So let's see who we have here in the chat. We have Jacqueline and Donnell. Donnell, you jumped pretty quickly from your live into here. We have Dale, Katie Crafts, Mona Balloonist, Josie from North Carolina. Good morning, everybody. So the block that I am working on is this block. It's a shoe fly variant. They're calling it Shetland Pony, which I don't know where they got all these names from, but if they want to name things how they want to name them, it is fine. As I said, I was able to get everything cut from leftovers that I had in previous boxes. I got to get my machine set up real quick because I have to do diagonals, and I hate doing diagonals. Good morning, Diana from California. It's a little early for you. Good morning. For anybody who is trying to sew along with a form of Saturday Sampler, where you're providing your own fabrics, because this is a in-person only at my local quilt shop program. I have been finding similar blocks on the interwebs, and I have a kind of similar block in this week's program. It's in the show notes below. And I think the difference is it's a rail fence instead of a four patch in the non-half square triangle. So you could obviously modify it however you want. Most quilt blocks aren't that difficult to dissect. The big thing about patterns is it gives you cutting instructions and fabric requirements and everything. So I would not feel bad if you dissected your own version of the pattern, but I cannot give you any cutting instructions or anything from here, so don't expect those. Like I said, you're going to have a similar block in the description. And that I also had to refill my thread this morning. I've gone through a lot of thread recently, and yeah, my spool emptied last night as I was finishing up the binding, and I left because I stitched with matching thread when I stitched down the binding. So I left that in the machine, and I got here. I was like, oh, cripes, I got to get that done too. So it has been an adventure this morning. And after this, I get to run up to the quilt shop, drop off that sample quilt, hopefully get some good pictures of it. And this evening, I will be on with my friend Stephanie, who I see has joined the chat. Good morning, Stephanie, on her channel, and we will be working on month 3 of Bumbleberry Pie, the block of the month that we have started. I kind of twisted her arm with it, which it didn't take a lot of twisting because it's such a gorgeous project. So we are working on that. I also see John from Guys Craft 2 in the chat. Good morning, John. I know it's very early for you as well because you're on Arizona time. I don't know if it's 3 or 2. I don't know how many hours different it is at this point. I don't do time zones. There's a worldtimezone.com for a reason. But he and I are about to publish an announcement video. We will be doing a collab Labor Day weekend where we will be sewing up a pattern partly on my channel, partly on his channel. And yeah, we're going to have some awesome stuff going on with that. So look for that announcement video tomorrow, so that you can pull up the pattern to get the fabric requirements if you want to join with us. It would be awesome if you joined us during the sew along. This month, 3 hours. So that still doesn't tell me if you're technically on Mountain or Pacific time right now. Like I said, I'm bad with time zones. I just asked my smart speaker, what time is it in wherever I'm looking for? Although Microsoft is pretty cool that if you highlight, or you can set multiple time zones in your clock that's down in your tray. And we have a lot of folks in Burbank that I work with directly. So I have my clock displayed normally, and then when I hover over it, it'll let me know what time it is in Burbank. I should probably do that for things like Arizona, because, you know, I have several friends in Arizona. So, and I'm like, I never know what time it is. So let's get a starting. Let me find my sewing setup. There we go. Stephanie says she can't wait to hear about it. Yes, it's a lot of fun. Joydy will be joining us. Good morning, Joydy. I did not see you come in. I apologize for that. So for this block, we have to make some half square triangles. And the way that I am doing it is I actually marked the line this time. I know I normally don't and everything, but I said, I'm going to actually do it properly for a change. So I do have a line drawn. You can see it there. And, oh yeah, it is 2 hours in the winter difference because that means I don't hit jet lag as bad. So I have my needle shifted to one position and the line shifted to the laser line shifted to one position so that I can line up on the laser line and sew on against the laser line, which is what most people will do when they are traditionally piecing half square triangles 2 at a time method. You may not have a laser light, and if you don't, that's when it's awesome to have a 1/4 inch foot, or you can adjust your needle so that the edge of your foot is a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the fabric. And when you do that, you can line the line that you drew up against the edge of your foot in order to keep that 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm also a fan of slightly oversizing your cuts. So if the fabric pattern, like if you're doing a 2.5 inch half square triangle, a lot of times the pattern will say a 3-inch square. And if you cut and sew perfectly, that's fine. I don't sew perfectly, so I would end up doing a little bit larger of a square and just trimming it down. I believe that's what I did here. I didn't, like I said, I didn't read the instructions because I cut all of this from me just dissecting the block when I saw the picture online. But I made sure that I cut it just a little bit bigger. I'm about to have to use an iron, so I need to turn that on. And that just means that I will be able to trim everything down once it is cut in half. So it is hard to see because both sides are really light, but I have the line in the center and I have stitching on both sides of the line. And I'm going to put those off to the side right now as I wait for my iron to heat up. And I'm just one of those crazy people that I will reset my machine if I want everything to go back to a different location. I know what the numbers are supposed to be, but it is slightly faster for it to do a reboot. And I'm changing my foot to a 1/4 inch foot because that's what I normally piece straight line fabric with. And we're just making a whole bunch of 4 patches at this point. So I figure I will just chain piece a whole bunch of these 4 patches. That's interesting. How did I do that? I somehow cut a square just a little too big. I cut 2 of them a little too big. It's a good thing I wasn't drinking and cutting. I will just line these up real quick and trim them down. Always better to cut too big than too small. So what is everybody working on today? Is there anything exciting going on out in the YouTube world? As I said, I've got this block going on. I know Monday, the Fort Worth Fabric Studio For the most part, sew along begins, and my friend Stephanie, Quilting with Stephanie Stitches, she does the tutorials, and she does those. She releases those on Monday morning, and then Saturday I will do the sew along, so that anybody who wants to sew with friends, they have that opportunity kind of in real time so that they can see everything that's happening. Stephanie does an awesome job just basically showing one block. And that's all I need in order to learn what's going on and how to do it. But some people just like to see, if I want to make, like if there's multiple of the same block, how do you chain piece that? Or how do you put it together in a so that you're doing everything over and over again. So that's what I end up doing with my sew-alongs. Look, I did it again on the purple somehow. I have no idea what I was doing last night. I must have had these two fabrics stacked on top of each other when I cut in order to get it to happen like this. Good morning, Kathleen. I saw you come in. She said nobody's perfect. Oops. And I will tell you, I am far from perfect. Barb says she is sewing straight lines on her Sift Squares mystery quilt. Barb says she loved Stephanie's tutorials. I'm telling you, Stephanie does awesome tutorials. One day I strive to be, 1/10 of her ability. Kathleen asks if I stack fabric when cutting. If I can, it makes cutting go a lot faster. The problem when you stack is if you're not right, you're going to be not right multiple times. Which isn't horrible if you have, if you cut too big. But it is really bad if you cut too small. So I am usually I try to be very cautious when I cut, but I am definitely more cautious when I cut in stacks, because the worst thing that you want to do is cut all your fabric too small. I have a story from, it was my beginning quilt class. I started just chain piecing the stuff because there was a requirement that in order to take their intermediate class, you need to take their beginning class. And I'm one that I'm like, it's the rules. I had been quilting piecing for about 4 or 5 years when I took the class. And the class instructor said, "Why are you in this class? You know what you're doing." And I said, "Well, 1, it's the requirement, and 2, I follow the rules, and 3, I'll probably learn something in this class." And I did learn, so I learned a lot in that class, even though I had been piecing for years. But the funny story about that is I started chain piecing, and the person who was sitting opposite me goes to the instructor and says, "What is he doing?" And the instructor explained, "He's chain piecing, and it helps you save time, but also if you do it wrong, you're going to do it wrong, 10, 20 times throughout all your fabric, and you're going to have to rip everything." And I was like, well, I usually try to be pretty good, but yes, she is right. I do not recommend chain piecing for anybody who is new. And I probably shouldn't have been chain piecing in a beginner class anyway, because that's not what the instructor said. I, like I said, I went through it. It was 3 years ago now, so it was many years after the class. I was chain piecing 56 blocks together, and it ended up being again double that, so basically 128 units. Or yeah, I think that's the number. 120 something units. And after I had gotten everything pieced together, I realized I did it wrong. So I had to trim or cut out all of these pieces, unsew everything. I was laughing the entire time. I mean, I was just giggling. I'm telling the story, and I'm like, yeah, Melinda's words finally caught up with me all these years later. So it doesn't stop me from doing chain piecing or chain cutting, but I have gotten to be a lot more cautious as I'm doing things. You can't just cut one at a time, but I will piece one first to make sure I'm doing it right before I piece, 100. So what I did over here is I pressed open, and I just pressed to the darker side, the half of the 4 patches, and then now I'm going to take the half square triangles and trim them apart. And then after they are trimmed, press them open. I know that there's tools that allow you to square up before you press open. When you're doing traditional like this, I will press open then square. I know it's a lot more work, but it's the way that my brain works when I'm trying to do, like, follow the instructions traditional piecing. Because we all know my favorite way to do half square triangles is triangulations. And I just didn't think this morning fast enough to print out a couple squares of triangulations. Triangulations is, for lack of a better term, software. It's a giant PDF document, and you can print out any size half square triangle you want, and it just prints out templates where you sew. I don't have any here. That I did. You lay 2 fabrics on top of each other, right sides together, and then you lay a sheet of triangulations on top of that, and then you sew on the lines on half square on triangulations, and then cut on the lines that it tells you to cut on. Lenore says something like she did last night, and she's been quilting for 30 years. Yep, definitely. It in the project that I did for the sample quilt, I made 2 giant mistakes. One of them was when I had to get some additional fabric at the quilt shop. I gave them the wrong number. So I ended up getting 2 cuts of this fabric because I said, you cut what I asked for and you can't put it back on the bolt. So I'm obviously buying 2 cuts of fabric. And she's just looking at me. I was like, it's my mistake. I'm not making you guys pay for my mistake. And then um, when I was piecing everything, the pattern, it was written properly. I just wasn't reading the pattern and counting. So as I'm doing again, it's chain piecing. I wasn't paying attention to what was being asked for because, again, I didn't reread the instructions. And in one of the steps, I cut too many pieces, which meant I didn't have enough fabric later. And I'm like, how am I running out of fabric? This doesn't make any sense. And then I finally went and looked at what I did and saw that I had cut 4 extra pieces to make a block. So, because the way the pattern's written, you lay it's everything's on a strip and you just lay everything onto the next strip. So you're Jenny Doan loves to do this when she's doing her projects, especially when it involves jelly rolls and stuff. So I was like, well, that's all I need to do is just lay everything on. And the fact that I didn't count that I cut too many in step 1 meant I didn't have enough fabric in step 2, which meant I didn't have enough fabric in step 3. But thankfully, I stopped myself, and I did have a little bit of extra yardage in the cuts that I had asked for to make the sample. So I am going to square these up. The way that I square up a half square triangle, and I misplaced my mini cutting mat, so I can't do it on here, is there is a 45-degree line on here, and I will line it up on the half square triangle as close to the first edge as I can to make sure that I'm trimming 2 sides. And then when I have that done, then I'll align it on this side and make sure on this side I have the exact size that I'm looking for my end result half square triangle. So you are cutting all 4 sides. You do have multiple lines that you can line up on in order to make sure that you keep everything square and exact, and you get a beautiful half square triangle in the end. If you are one of those people who loves all the tools, you could also purchase a square that is the exact size of the half square triangle you're looking to cut and line up everything. And the awesome thing about smaller cutting mats is if it's a smaller cutting mat, it's a rotating mat because you can pick up a smaller mat and rotate the entire mat. I wouldn't want to try to rotate, a 36-inch mat, but I would rotate I'm going to say a 10-inch mat. And I am not rotating a mat here. I am rotating the fabric because my square or my ruler is not the size square I need. Smallest ruler that I have square that I have convenient is 6 inches, and that's too big. Last cutting, and then we can put this block together almost. The other thing that I did this week is I bought a rotary cutter to keep over by my sewing area. because I have gone back and forth with the rotary cutter, and I'm like, I keep forgetting right before the live to grab my rotary cutter from my cutting station back there to bring it over here for trimming, or I'll be over here and trying to cut over there. I'm like, where's my oh, it's over here. So I have duplicated rotary cutters, and it's a different color than my normal cutting, which is different color than my travel cutting, so I know which cutting rotary cutter is which rotary cutter. Joydy makes key fobs. Ooh, that sounds exciting. Because there's hardware involved, and I love hardware. So for these 4 patches, we are just... I'm going to sew them this way. And the only reason I'm sewing them this way is because when I fold them on top of each other, the seams will nest exactly. If I had them this way, which looks exactly the same, I'm sorry. Why don't I have them a second go? Yeah. If I have them this way, the seams are still going to nest, but as it's going through my sewing machine, the top one can shift a couple threads, and it would make it so that the seam is not perfect. But when they are nesting so that oh, I'm directionally challenged this morning. When they're nesting so that when you are trying to push downwards and you cannot push them downwards, they're locked into each other, you are almost guaranteed to keep your intersection completely square. And let me just grab these so I know I'm grabbing them the right way. Now, if you're doing blocks that are 4 patches into 4 patches, obviously all your seams are not going to nest like this as you get bigger, so you need to decide where you want to be able to get guaranteed sharp points like this, or where you are okay with flubbing it the other way. And that's always a give and take with me, because there's no way to always have these sharp points unless you let some of your seams not twist. If you're going to twist every seam, every other sew that you're going to have is going to be not pointy like this. If that makes any sense at all. Donnell got Joydy into doing key fobs. Oh, but it requires a tool. Tools are fun. And let's check our points, because that's the important thing that we are doing with our Saturday sampler blocks. That one is perfect. That one is perfect. And it's because of the way that I have them butt up to each other. So they all came out perfect. And because they are not joining at any seams, I have no issues twisting the seam in the back. To twist the seam, as I shown before, you just pop the stitches that are in the center. It works perfectly if you have your seams perfect in the center. If your seams are slightly off, it still will work. It's just you have to pop a stitch or two in order to get it to work. And sometimes you still have to pop a stitch. So I'm going to press these open. I saw back there, somebody said Donnell is an influencer when it comes to the key fobs. Donnell has some amazing projects that she does. As I've talked to her or ordered from her last week, 2 weeks ago, the sewing machines that her hubby and son are 3D printing, they are amazing. As I'm twisting my seams, I'm remembering I was visiting the quilt shop last week. It was Sunday. And one of the ladies who was working, she normally works Saturday, but there was a class going on that was being taught by the person who normally teaches Sunday. So schedules got shifted. And I got to see her. And she's like, "So what are you doing?" And I was like, "It's the start of my 9-day weekend." And she asked what I had planned for my 9-day weekend, and I said, "Well, the day before, so a week ago today, I was working on the 9 patches from Stephanie's rock candy pattern, and how I was working on making sure every seam was twisting properly." And she said, "Oh, that's pretty exciting." And I said, "Yeah, if you look at the back of the block, it looks like quilter's porn." And she starts talking, and you can see how what I said went right past her, turned around, and smacked her in the back of the head. And she almost died laughing because she did not expect me to have said that phrase. Then we started talking about the Olympics, and I said, "Yeah, the only thing that I saw from the Olympics was that pole vaulter and that swimmer." And she's like, "Okay, I heard about the pole vaulter because she has friends at um, trivia who were talking about it, but she did not hear about the swimmer." So I had to share the picture of the swimmer. All right, that's right. I'm following the picture that I have off to the side to make sure I lay out this block correctly, which correctly is in your own um, decision, because you may want the blocks lined up a little bit differently. Oh, thank you, Joydy. She says that I am a great teacher and my tutorials are wonderful. Judy says the thing with making key fobs is when you make one, they're like potato chips. You have to make another. The funny thing is, I can eat just one potato chip. I am not a fan of potato chips. now that we have everything laid out, we can just sew them in rows. And it's always very satisfying when you put a pieced block or unit next to a cut unit, and they are exactly the same size. Because I know the half square triangles I trimmed to be exactly the size I need. But these 4 patches, I'm just relying on my 1/4 inch. And my 1/4 inch apparently was pretty nice today. Jody says I must not be eating the right chips. So I have learned that I really like some of the Canadian flavors. My friend Steven of... Now this is going to be interesting. We'll talk about this in a second. My friend Steven of Land Designs and the Idiot Quilter, he brought down a bunch of Canadian chips when he came down to Stephanie's Georgia retreat last Christmas. And the all-in chips I really loved. And my sister had to go to Nova Scotia back in about a month or so ago, and I said, smuggle me back some all-in chips. Because, you know, they have to cross the border, so I'm like, okay, you're smuggling. I know it's perfectly fine, but it's more fun to say smuggle. And she brought me back a bunch of flavors because she didn't realize that I've had the all-in and I really liked the all-in. Otherwise, she would have brought me more of those. So I really like those. And as I was like eating them, like I ate the, I mean, they're smaller bags, but I learned that the Canadian chips have fewer calories per serving than the American chips. So obviously there's probably an ingredient that Canada doesn't allow that America uses that causes the chips to be probably cheaper to make, but also more calories. Which is why it feels like the chips bags are getting smaller and smaller, and I fully believe the chip bags are getting smaller and smaller. And it's because they're trying to keep the number of calories per individual serving bag at a certain number that's directed by the FDA. Or if you look at most things that say a serving size is like 150 calories when it comes to snacky foods, that's what they're trying to keep things down to. So whatever the chips are that they're doing ends up being 150 calories. Donnell says her favorite chips are cauliflower chips. I've made kale chips, and they're pretty good. Kathleen says she noticed I didn't fussy cut my center. Do I fussy cut at all? This fabric in the center, I didn't feel like was fussy enough to fussy cut. So I have not fussy cut in this Saturday sampler. I didn't see it really necessary. I get enough of a pattern in here just by random cutting. So I'm going to call this random cutting my fussy cut. That said, the Tabby Road quilt that I cut the other day, or that I did the other day, that one I did fussy cut the cats. Just because I didn't want to have a cat with half a head or half a tail or something like that. I did cut all the fabric that it was fussy cut in order to make sure everything was there. So I will fussy cut when I think the pattern needs to be fussy cut. And while this led itself to being fussy cut, I didn't see a need. So now I got to figure out how I am going to press this. And the reason why I paused earlier is because I'm going to press things different from what most people would. The reason is right here. This wants to just go this way naturally. It wants to be pressed towards the center naturally because this seam wants to go that way. This seam wants to go this way. But I would rather have a seam that's at the edge going the direction it wants to go as opposed to trying to make the rest of the block go differently. Which does mean, if we look at the back of this, it does mean that the center is going to be pressed out, which is, again, it's different from the way that it wants to be pressed because you've got a seam here and no seam here. So it wants to go this way naturally, but I can't have both going this way. And I would rather have an outside seam going in the direction that it wants to go than worry about the inside seam. So I'm going to press the outsides towards the center and the insides towards the outside, just to make the block a little happier. The long arm doesn't really care. It's a sharp needle. It's a fast needle. As long as you don't have too much bulk, it doesn't care. Or your home machine doesn't care as much either. Kathleen says the colorway that she is doing needs to be fussy cut. Which colorway are you doing? I don't think I noticed that any really needed to be fussy cut. I mean, fussy cutting does make some things look better. But I don't recall the colorways really almost requiring fussy cut. The blue and pink one. Do I have the site still open? Of course not. I will have to look at it later. Could he? I know that they advertised trying to fussy cut when you could. And like I said, it just didn't bother me enough to fussy cut. Now, if I trim something and because we have an eighth of a yard, I'm sorry, a fat eighth of a yard. If I trimmed, I'm going to say a 4.5 inch piece, I would look in that 4.5 inch piece to see, okay, maybe these look a little bit better than these, to try to maybe fussy cut that. But my initial cut, I am not fussy cutting. Like I said, unless it's going to be a bigger project that there's a lot of fussy cutting that's going to happen. Let me show this real quick. So everything is now flat. My seams are now flat. Irons make things flat. I am now going to sew everything together. Because I chain sewed everything is in what we call web piecing. think of it like a spider web. Everything is interconnected. When I get my first couple stitches done, that's when I will cut these threads apart. So now it's cut apart, and I will line up the intersections that need to be lined up and let it rip. And Kathleen says she likes the centerpiece. Thank you. And there are no points in this block, so that makes it a little easier. I am also going to press these towards the center. I'm just going to give it a quick finger press towards the center. And it's again because of these edge pieces that the half square triangle is going to take precedent over the 4-patch. Kathleen, because I know you go to the same shop, if you haven't seen their Christmas in August event, you should go look at it. It's got a lot of fun patterns and kits that they have available. I had to stop myself from purchasing anything because I haven't done anything with the kits that I bought last year from their Christmas event. And because I know that these are 9 patches, I know I could have sat and twisted every seam as well if I wanted to. But again, the half square triangles are taking precedence, and I would not be able to twist both seams. I would have to end up pressing these outwards to press these inwards. And then that I could do it, but I don't want this extra funky bulk up here. So I'm just going to press everything towards the center. With their Saturday sampler program, the blocks don't touch other blocks. So I don't care which direction things are which direction things are pressed. If your blocks are touching another block, probably are a little bit more concerned about where the pressing direction is going. And I'm probably going to break out my clapper for this a little bit later, just to get it a little flatter. Because it doesn't want to lay flat right now. I could also use some Acorn Easy Press pen, or as Stephanie calls it, magic juice. Marilyn said she was not aware about the pressing direction next to the edge. Again, it's not important, but the way that the seams will lay as um, as your blocks are just sitting around, that is a different. It has some impact. It's not a lot. I could just as easily press these blocks open on the edges. Good morning, Amy. Glad to see that you made it. But if you look at the back, I still need to, like I said, probably put it underneath the clapper. But the block is done. I am loving these fabrics. And because she made a comment in one of the Saturday sampler sessions, it measures 12 and a half. Actually, this one might be a hair short, but once I get it underneath the clapper, it'll probably stretch out that extra 16th of an inch. So I'm not worried about a 16th of an inch. So this is block number 6 in our Saturday sampler program. I will be excited to see what happens with the next 6 blocks. The other thing that they did announce for anybody who is local, their next Saturday sampler program is going to start in January. They're having supply chain issues again. So historically, they started programs in January and June. This time, they started this one in March. So they were expecting to start one sometime in the summer because they like to have 2 programs going in alternating months or alternating groups. But they could not get, well, they had a Saturday sampler program picked out and everything. But when they had their pattern testers tested out, it seemed to be a little bit more advanced than what they normally do for Saturday samplers. So they decided that they were just going to kit it up. It's a gorgeous quilt. And when I was looking at it, the first thing I said is, this can't be a Saturday sampler because I did see some advanced piecing. They try to keep their Saturday samplers to be confident beginner, which is why I can do these blocks in an hour. But they obviously just said, we're just going to kit this up because they don't want to have more of the beginner folks to be frustrated in that. So it's a combination of supply chain issues and they have to find another pattern. So maybe one day I will get my pattern writing skills up there and I will say, hey, can I write a Saturday sampler for you guys? So we will see what ends up happening. Amy says she saw the announcement gives her a chance to catch up on past Saturday samplers that are unfinished. I can't tell you how many Saturday samplers that I have that are unfinished. It's probably going to be the point that I may just start giving away blocks and finishing kits to people who may be interested. Just because a lot of them, they are just so far in the past, and I know all they need is a little bit of TLC to get them put together, but I now have so many projects I'm working on. So as I start to organize things, there may be a few giveaways in the future that says, hey, I got a Saturday sampler that I have 11 of the 12 blocks done, and here's the finishing kit. You can do whatever you want with it. And hopefully, maybe somebody will enjoy it. Maybe not. Kathleen doesn't have any unfinished Saturday samplers. That's a good thing. I'm trying to think of what I've done, because there was the grays last year that I gave my cousin. So I think that finished. I don't remember if that finished in December or May. but I gave my cousin the grays for Christmas last year. So that one, I think that was the first Saturday sampler I actually finished. Uh, so I'm trying to keep up with them, but like I said, other projects that I have going along keeps me busy with other things. I just enjoy having something monthly to sew on, and then also it gets me into the shop so I can do show and tell. So it really just keeps me motivated to move. Um, and then, like I said, some of these I'm like I have somebody in mind that would love a finished quilt with it. And now that I have a long arm, I should be able to finish them. Amy has lots of 11 of 12 done and finishing kits. Uh, yeah. So it is just afternoon. I have been up here for right at an hour now. It has been wonderful hanging out with y'all. I now need to go to drop off that shop sample quilt up at the shop, and I am excited to be able to go see it hanging. Apparently, the person who is good on the ladder is working today, so I may help get it hung up. And that, as a reminder, this afternoon at 5 o'clock Eastern, I will be live over on my friend Stephanie's channel. We are sewing up month 3 of Bumbleberry Pie Sew Along. I believe there's links to get the pattern and or fabric and stuff in the Bumbleberry Pie Sew Along videos. And then tomorrow morning, look for the announcement video with me and Guys Craft 2. We have announcement videos on both of our channels. And this evening, not this evening, tomorrow evening, I will have my weekly vlog, which will have all the shenanigans that I was up to this week. And there's both more and less because I have been off all week. So I have been in here a lot. I just haven't had a lot of video snippets to put in there or clips in there of anything to show. But I will have 3 show and tells in the video. So be excited for that. So hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day and an awesome weekend, and give everybody in the YouTube world that is going live a little bit of love. Toodles!